Hey guys, I am here today to review. I was going to do mostly the newest book in a series that I've really been enjoying, but then I realized, well, I haven't talked about the other three books in this series, so guess I'm just kind of gonna go for it. So today I am going to be talking about the VIP series by Kristen Callihan. This is a set of currently 4 Rockstar romance books. Hopefully soon there will be 5. And the most recent one, this is called Exposed, but the original book was Idle, and then there was Managed, and then there was Fall, and now there's Exposed. So we're gonna go over the entire series because when I considered just reviewing Exposed, I realized that the way that I feel about Exposed is really dependent on the other 3 books. And it would be hard for me to tell you why that book was kind of a letdown for me without talking about the other ones. So if you're just here to hear me talk about Exposed, I will down in the comments give you like the time in the video that you can skip to. Otherwise, we are going to talk about the first 3 books. Spoilers will ensue, in the sense that the spoilers are that the people who are paired off in those books get together. They're romance novels. I don't think you're gonna be super shocked. So with that being said, let's get started with the general premise of this series. So the VIP series is a Rockstar romance, and all of the dudes in the book are related to a band called Kill John. Kill John has 4 main members. There's Callihan, who is a guitarist and a singer. There's Jax, who is a guitarist and a singer. There's Rye, who is the bassist, and Whip, who is the drummer. They also have their manager, his name is Scotty, and someone who does their PR, her name is Brenna. And Brenna is Callihan's cousin. And so the 6 of them have really been a unit. They started the band when they were teens, and they have gone from, you know, obscurity to absolute superstardom. Kill John is like superstar band, and the name, if you're wondering, is a joke because it's like Callihan, and then Jax's real name is John, so Kill John, joke. Idle, like I said, is the first book in the series, and it sets up one of the major things about this series that you really need to know up front. And so if you do not want books that mention and discuss suicide and depression, these are not going to be books for you. I will put that right up front. There is going to be that discussion. It is never shown in the books. It is something that has happened to one of the band members prior to the start of even the first book, but it is discussed particularly in his book. Kristen Callihan has said that Kurt Cobain in particular is an inspiration for this series, and also she has been really open with her own struggles with depression and how she's kind of written this storyline. So the first book, like I said, is Idle, and this is Callihan's story, and it's basically him kind of right after the suicide attempt. Jax has overdosed, and all of the band, you know, they've gone from this like freewheeling lifestyle, you know, girls, drugs, booze, whatever, to just being really shaken by Jax almost dying. And Callihan, who is Jax's best friend, has taken it really hard. He doesn't know how to manage his feelings because, you know, he was the one that found Jax, and he's really broken up about it, but he's also really angry at himself for not seeing that Jax was hurting, at Jax for what he did. Like, you know, it's a lot of complicated emotions, and Callihan just knows that he can't be around Jax right now because Jax needs to heal, and this emotions that he's feeling, he feels would be counterproductive to that. So he like heads out to this island in the middle of nowhere, but he is not well. And so the opening scene is he is driving his motorcycle drunk, and he crashes onto the front lawn of a woman named Libby. Libby is a illustrator living at home. Both of her parents were killed by a drunk driver, so literally Callihan is the last person she ever wants to see, ever. But they are both in need of human contact that is not people that they know. Libby's been on her own for a while. Callihan is trying to like just figure out why he wanted to be a rock star to begin with. Like, is this life something that he really wants? And they just grow together. Although Libby does need like a lot of convincing that he's not a drunk, which was an interesting like opening. This book also does something weird where like it opens with the past, and it's a scene of Kiljon on stage and Callihan clearly like loving the energy of the crowd, and then it goes the future, and there's this bit where Libby is giving a interview to someone, and it's become clear that something has happened in her life that has made her famous in some way, but she and Callihan are not together. So I would just ignore it personally, because it was just kind of frustrating. Like, you know, by that point, like in the first couple of pages, that Libby has some kind of musical talent that has made her famous before we even meet her, and you know that they've broken up, but like, you know, they're gonna get back together because it's a romance novel. So I feel like those bits kind of take away from the book, and they're the only book that they happen in. I did really like their romance. I like how they really genuinely connected over their mutual love of music. You eventually find out that Libby can sing, and that's what she's doing later on in the book. And they are just genuinely like creating this cocoon of a genuine love of music together, and falling in love and healing from their own individual like traumas and the things that have brought them to this moment. So it was not for me like a wow kind of a book when I finished it, but I knew when I did finish it that I would want to read more, and I did. So Managed is the second book, and this is Scotty's story. Scotty is the band's manager, given the Managed title, you may have guessed. And this book is not one of my favorite tropes, which is that Scotty is a very uptight, buttoned up, you know, he makes the trains run on time because the band themselves cannot be trusted to, you know, get where they're going and where they need to be. So he runs a really tight ship. He is, you know, buttoned up. Like, the effects of Jax's suicide have hit him really hard, and that he feels like he didn't manage them enough and he wasn't keeping enough care. And he's just not, you know, he's very closed off. And then you get Sophie, who is like dyed hair, super bubbly, could never keep a secret because she's just like da 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 da. So this book, the opening scene is that Sophie has been upgraded. She's flying overseas to interview for a job as a social media specialist, and she meets a really, really hot guy in the seat next to her, and they totally flirt and, you know, clearly, you know, making passes at each other. Come to find out that she is on that flight to interview to be a member of Scotty's team. She is there to interview for Kiljon and be their social media specialist. She gets the job because Brenna is the one doing the hiring, and then they have to do the whole thing of like, we can't possibly be together because we work together. And it's like, okay. I did end up giving this one 4 stars. I think that it's a really solidly written romance, and I had a lot of fun. It's just in between knowing what comes after it, in between Idle and Fall, it was just like, okay, this is more of the same. It's progressing us forward. You know, in the background, the band is kind of healing. After book 1, they go back on tour together, and that's why they need Sophie in this, because they need someone to like social media their tour. And so, you know, they're healing in the background, and you kind of know that. And I understand we needed that time before we got to Fall, which is Jax's book. But it was just kind of like, okay. So in Idle, when Callihan brings Libby to meet his bandmates for the first time, it's the first time that he has seen Jax since the suicide attempt. And there is clearly just like a lot of unresolved trauma there between the two of them. And I think they end up actually getting into like a fist fight. It's the whole thing. And so by the time we get to Fall, which is book 3, everyone has kind of backpedaled that, and they are just hovering on Jax. Like, did you go to therapy? Did you do your... And so Jax is just kind of like, you know, I deserve this, and I understand why they're acting this way, but also like, oh my God, stop. So Callihan and Libby have gone off to Australia for like 4 months in like a weird attempt to be like, okay, you asked for space, we'll do that. And they need someone to pet sit their cats. Enter Stella, who the opening scene is in a grocery store and there's a blizzard incoming, and Stella has to get provisions, and she and a guy in the freezer aisle, one of the hottest guys she's ever seen, but she doesn't recognize, fight over the mint chocolate chip ice cream. And in order to distract him so that she can get what she calls the mint, she kisses him, totally flabbergasts him, and then like kind of runs out with the ice cream. Come to find out, she has been asked to pet sit Callihan's cats, and Callihan and Jax share 2 halves of a penthouse in a very unique apartment. And so she's leaving one day, runs into the ice cream attempted thief, and they begin to strike up a friendship. Stella has her own issues. She was abandoned as a child by her father, and she is also battling a little bit of depression and loneliness, and so her and Jax really connect on that level. But she also has this understanding of like, Jax loves that he didn't know her before. She only knows him now, and even though, you know, there's nothing wrong with that either way, but he initially gets a lot of freedom from that. Like, this is just who I am, like, don't think about that. And she's also just not awed by his celebrity. This book does a couple of interesting things. There's some really powerful discussion about depression, about suicide, and also about STDs, which I know is not something you expected me to say, but is a plot line that comes up in this. It's not between that, it's like a thing. Just read it. But it's just, I think, again, there's so much emotional stuff happening in Idol around this, and there's so much happening in Fall about this, that they're definitely my 2 favorite books of the series, because they really do kind of encapsulate that this entire situation is complicated. And just because Jax is in therapy doesn't mean he's healed. And just because Jax falls in love with Stella, it doesn't mean that he's healed. And just because, you know, Callihan and Jax they've like tried to talk about what happened but haven't really gotten there, like, again, that healing process as well is not simple and is not easy. And I just, again, it has to be a kind of topic that you want to read about in a romance novel, which is explicit. But those 2 books in particular, they're just really, really heart-touching storylines with really, really sweet romances. Again, not that Managed isn't. Managed is really cute as well, but it doesn't have the same emotional connection to the mental health bit, which, as someone who has their own mental health problems, is more interesting to me. So that brings us to Exposed, which, depending on how you feel about certain things, could have been, like, after the first 3 books, a very, very anticipated story for you. And I know that it was for me, because in the first 3 books, you meet Rye and you meet Brenna individually, and everyone knows that they hate each other so much. Like, they can't be in a room together because it's just like this all of the time. And obviously, that means they love each other. And when that was first introduced, I was like, oh God, not this. I really don't like, everyone's like, oh, they hate each other, so they must really just want to screw. But you learn in bits and pieces over the books that something has happened. You don't quite know what it is that has made them treat each other this way. And so even if, you know, you're not super interested in that, it begins like, I need to know the answer. And I feel like Brenna and Rye individually are really great characters. So Exposed just felt like finally we get their story. Finally. The problem with Rye and Brenna's book in Exposed is that you know what's coming, and it doesn't have anything else extra added into it. So in the opening scene, Brenna is out at a club with a friend, and she mentions that she has just not been able to have any good sex, and she just wants to be able to have really mind-blowingly good sex with someone that she has a connection to without having to have like a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And Rye overhears this, and so he's like, I can't unhear this now. And so he begins to badger Brenna, like, you and I both know that we've been attracted to each other for a really long time, and we should just do this, and we can definitely do this. Despite the fact that they work on Killjohn together, that they have all this history, that if it goes sideways, it's gonna go poorly for everyone they love. I kind of got the sense that Brennan was like, no, 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 and Rye just kind of kept showing up and saying, yes, let's do this, until he wears her down. Not a huge fan of that. Again, even though Brenna wants to sleep with him, not a fan of that. Then the thing that they've like, why they've hated each other ends up being just like this ridiculous miscommunication where Brenna thinks that Rye has actually done something like really gross, and she does not talk to him about that before they sleep together the first couple of times. And I'm like, yo, I would have addressed that like right up front. And there's also like a weird backstory where there's a chance that Rye has carpal tunnel and won't be able to play the bass anymore, which just kind of gets shoved under the rug. It's like, the problem with particularly, again, Fall and Idol is that they had these really incredibly strong storylines on top of the romance, and for Exposed, there's just the romance. You know that it's coming, you know the characters, and then it does not do anything interesting with that story, considering that we all know that they hate each other. There's a reason they hate each other that they'll have to like clear up, and they're gonna sleep together and they're gonna be together. Like, it needed a little bit of something extra, especially by this point. The major trauma surrounding Jax's suicide are mostly wrapped up. They really don't come up for Rye or Brenna basically at all. There's like one scene in the beginning, but that doesn't really come in at all. Again, not saying that everyone's healed and everybody's fine, but it just doesn't come up. So after, 3 books, 2 of them that were really, really strong, I did feel like Exposed was just kind of like exactly what I expected. Again, it's well written, it's cute, it's spicy, but it doesn't do anything extra. It doesn't really say anything more like Fall and Idol did, and it is what it is. It is the exact story you expected when Brenna and Rye were first introduced as characters, and you knew eventually they'd get a book. That's what it is. I want Whip's story. It is very clear that Whip the drummer has something going on, and we don't quite know what it is. And there was a scene in Exposed where I was like, oh my god, what was that him? What? Because like, there's a scene that happens with Brenna and a mystery woman, and they talk for an extended period of time about something that's happened to her, and it makes no other sense unless it's connected to Whip, who is the only character so far who is not paired off. And I want to know, because at least that has some mystery to it. So I do love this series. I do think that some books are much stronger than others, but I do highly recommend a read of it for everyone. So enjoy a Rockstar romance. If you have any other Rockstar romance recommendations, leave them down in the comments for me. If you have read these books and disagreed or agreed, also let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!